It's crazy to think about how, 1 year can make a big difference. Because sitting down here and saying this time last year, you would have said I'm crazy. You would have looked at me like I got five eyes. You would be like, you have no clue what you're talking about. But now it's like, I actually think we may be starting to see a change of things when it at least comes to the AFC. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit regarding the fact that we do have at least one playoff game. But I honestly think that the defending Super Bowl champions might actually be a better opponent for us. So I'm going to dive into it a little bit. What is going on, everybody? I am Mac, back with another video. As always, do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe, follow on Instagram. Link is in the box below. So this is not my preview for the Bills and the Steelers. I'll have that out within the next couple of days or so. But, I was at work tonight, and a buddy of mine brought this to my attention. And at first I was like, I really don't know if I can agree with you on it. But then he started explaining a little bit more. And I actually agree with him now. I really do think that while I'm not 100% positive that we could beat Kansas City in the playoffs, but I do think that they would actually be a better matchup for us this Sunday than the Buffalo Bills. And I know I have no control over it. I know there's nothing I can do about it. I can just sit down here and, give you my opinion. Because let me put it to you like this. The Buffalo Bills are coming in the playoffs on a 5-game winning streak. And they went from whatever they were mid-season, losing a lot of head-scratching games and barely squeaking out wins, to now getting a new offensive coordinator and looking like their old selves on offense again. I mean, Josh Allen's one of the biggest double-edged swords in the league, if he's not the biggest double-edged sword in the league, because the guy led the league in touchdowns this season, and he also is very turnover-prone. But then you got to, also you got to take a look at Buffalo's defense. I mean, they still got playmakers on the defense. Their defense can still be prolific, but, they're aging, and, they've taken a little bit step back as far as defense goes. But I think the one thing that everybody can agree on is that going up to Buffalo, hostile environment, it's supposed to be snowing heavily on Sunday afternoon. The Buffalo Bills are probably, aside from Baltimore, the last team that anybody would want to play in the playoffs right now. And I say that because usually the cream of the crop is over in the middle of the country in Kansas City. And it's crazy to say that even though they're the defending champions, and even though Patrick Mahomes just doesn't lose at home, especially in the playoffs. I mean, he has lost 2 home playoff games, I believe, but both were in overtime. But still, nonetheless, going to Arrowhead and beating Mahomes is never an easy task. It's always a tall order. But what I'm getting at is that, honestly, the Chiefs could be a better matchup for us than the Bills at this point. Because, sure, Kansas City, they won the AFC West again. They're the number 3 seed in the AFC. But I got to tell you, I've said this pretty much over the course of the last month or so. You can see it in my Pick'em videos. You can hear parts of it in my streams where I've been streaming the Steelers games. This Chiefs team is the most vulnerable I've seen them personally since 2017, the year before Mahomes became the franchise starter. I just don't see anything special with Kansas City this year. I don't think they're going to go far in a playoff push, but I'm certainly not taking them lightly, you know, because let's face it, Mahomes always turns it up a notch in the playoffs. So, I mean, I'm not taking them lightly, but the way Kansas City went about their season this year, very underwhelming on offense. And you got to take into consideration that Mahomes was coming off his second MVP season from 2022. And that was a season in which he had 41 touchdown passes. I think he led the league in touchdown passes last year. And he just overall had a very prolific season without Tyreek Hill. And he was making the most of what he had at receivers. Juju Smith-Schuster, when he was over in Kansas City, he probably had the best season of his career. And of course, you always got to figure in Travis Kelce is going to be one of if not the biggest factor on that Kansas City offense. They got a solid running game, or they got an okay running game. Nothing amazing, but nothing terrible at the same time. But it's a serviceable run game. But this year, the Chiefs have taken a step back. They were actually in danger at one point to where it's like, are you sure Kansas City's going to cakewalk to the AFC West? I mean, they just got dominated by the Denver Broncos, and we all know the Chiefs absolutely have owned the Broncos, and Mahomes has literally never lost to the Broncos, but then they lose to them by, 15, 16 points, something like that. And the Broncos were on a tear, and it's like Denver can all of a sudden sneak up on Kansas City and steal the division away from them. A lot of the games this year, Kansas City struggled in. I think really the only complete win, to the best of my memory with the Chiefs, is all the way back earlier in the season when they throttled the Chicago Bears. Sure, they beat I'm just trying to remember at the top of my head who Kansas City played, because I know they split with Vegas. The first game against Vegas, they found themselves in a 14-0 deficit, and the Chiefs did end up winning that game by double digits themselves, but you gotta be a little alarmed at the fact that they were trailing 14-0 in the blink of an eye, and then the Raiders got them back pretty good on Christmas Day, putting a big old lump of coal in their stocking. They split with the Denver Broncos, as I just mentioned, but the first Bronco game, the defense did everything they could to keep Kansas City at bay offensively. And then the second game, Denver just completely dominated on both facets. And they did end up sweeping the Chargers, who finished last place in the AFC West this season. But the first game, even though the Chiefs did beat them by double digits, LA hung in there with them early on. And then on Sunday, the Chiefs did get the job done over the Chargers, but they needed a miracle. They needed a comeback just to beat Easton Stick and an interim LA Chargers head coach. They struggled in a lot of games this year, man. I think they had to win a defensive slugfest against Jacksonville early on. They struggled at times against the Bengals a couple weeks ago. And now that I think about it, maybe they did dominate the New England Patriots, but this is the worst Patriots team that I've ever seen. Not really impressed by that, and I know I don't really have any room to sit here and say that, considering what happened a month ago on Thursday Night Football. But still, that was like their only complete win outside of the Chicago game. They had to win a fist fight on Monday Night Football against the Jets, or Sunday Night Football earlier in the season against the Jets, where the Jets defense caused Kansas City to have a lot of problems. They lose at home to the Buffalo Bills in the regular season, which is why I'm even more sitting down here saying that the Bills are the last team that everybody wants to play, because they can actually stand up to Kansas City in the AFC. And then that Miami game they had in Germany, I believe, the Chiefs did climb up to a big lead against Miami, but they nearly blew it against them, and Miami was right back in the mix before you know it. Then on the NFC side of things, they drop one to Green Bay on Sunday Night Football. They had trouble putting away Minnesota. And then they lose on opening night against Detroit. Not a knock at Detroit. Detroit had a phenomenal season. Hope they go far in the playoffs. But to lose at home to start the season off against the Lions, that is kind of like a season tone setter right there. And I think Dolphins fans got to be confident going into Arrowhead, going up against this Chiefs team, because Tyreek Hill does know the Kansas City Chiefs. I think he's perfectly capable of gashing that defense. I think Jalen Waddle's going to be healthy. And I think Miami is just on a mission, while the Chiefs, they have a lot of question marks as far as the offense goes. Because while I'm certainly not sitting down here saying Mahomes is nothing without Tyreek Hill, and he's nothing without Travis Kelce, rather, and he may not even be nothing without Juju Smith-Schuster as well at this point. What I am getting at is that these receivers have not been stepping up for Kansas City, and with Mahomes tossing 27 touchdown passes this season, which is respectable, it's kind of low for his standards, wouldn't you say? But he also did throw 14 interceptions this year. And with this Steeler defense, say what you want about it, with TJ Watt being out, because we don't get a whole lot of pressure when TJ's out of the equation. But if we were to go to Arrowhead and play Kansas City, I think we could still generate pressure. And I think we could cause turnovers as well, because that's the formula to how to beat Patrick Mahomes. You lock down his targets, lack thereof, or at this point, you just got to make him go deep and hope that these receivers can make a catch. And it's shown numerous times this season, these receivers have been very unclutch for Kansas City, dropping passes left and right. I think the Chiefs actually were a leader in dropped passes this season. And this secondary, with getting Minkah Fitzpatrick back more likely than not, and DeMonte Kazee actually coming in for the playoffs, that's a big confidence builder for the secondary that is perfectly capable of causing turnovers. All year long, JPJ's been a magnificent story. Every week it's like, oh, Devontae Adams, go lock him down, kid. Oh, Jamar Chase, go lock him down, kid. Let's see, who else? You get the point, though. You can't really say that about Kansas City, because they don't really have an explosive wide receiver anymore. I don't even really know who their best receiver is, or who their best weapon outside of Travis Kelce is. But you're probably not going to put JPJ on Travis Kelce. So really, all you got to do is lock down Kansas City's targets. And I think that this secondary would be capable of causing Mahomes to throw a pick or two and win that turnover battle. And I think the magic number this year of beating Kansas City is you got to crack 20 points. And guess what? Under Mason Rudolph, the Steelers have scored 81 points. 81 points in 3 games under Mason Rudolph. Basically, the Steelers average 27 points a game when Mason Rudolph is under center for us this season. And I think that's enough. to be able to beat Kansas City. Is it enough to beat Buffalo? I don't know. It might be. But I'm sitting down here saying, as a fan who doesn't think this team is going to go very far in the playoffs, I certainly don't think this is a Super Bowl team. However, if you would put us up against Kansas City, so if Miami won on Sunday, we would be going to Arrowhead. And I think my confidence would actually be higher than what it is with going into Buffalo. But as it is, I can't decipher that. I can't control that. All I can do is just sit down here and watch the game against the Bills. But isn't it funny how everyone went from no one wants to play Kansas City, that's the last team that we all want to play, to now it's like, yeah, the Chiefs are beatable. And I give us a decent chance at beating them in the playoffs. But let me know what you think down below. Who do you think would be the best matchup for the Steelers, or the team that you have the most confidence of beating in the playoffs if you are a Steeler fan? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I am Mac, checking on out for the night. Have a good one, everybody.